I was thinking what we should talk about today, and I don't know what different people, what knowledge that people have here about what we do. We The Jewish community, the general custom is that we read through the Torah, a different section each week. That there have been in the past different customs as to how we read through, whether we um, take 1 year to read through or 3 years. But the accepted custom now is that we read through the whole of the Torah. That's not just the 5 books of Moses during 1 year. And we've just finished the reading and we just restarted. So we've just yesterday we did the creation story again. I thought before I talk about anything else, we should have a look at the important aspects of the creation story that are connected to speech. So we're told that on day 6, human is created. There's this being called human. The way it's described in the verse is that God took earth or dust from the ground and breathed into it a living soul. And then it became into a living being. Now, we don't really understand what that means. I mean, I'm not sure if anybody here really understands what we're talking about here. I definitely don't. Maybe deep Kabbalistic ideas, deep mystical ideas of what does it actually mean that God breathes into this being made of dust of earth and suddenly it becomes alive. But I want to share with you a translation or an explanation of that verse from a very, very famous commentator. This person, his name is Onkelos. It's in English, it's spelled Onkelos, something like that. Onkelos. And I don't know if you've heard of Onkelos before. Some of you are nodding. He himself was born not Jewish. He's one of the most famous converts to Judaism through Jewish history. One of the reasons why he's so famous is that he was Titus's nephew. So Titus, the evil Caesar of the Romans, who was the Caesar when the temple was destroyed. He destroyed the temple. That he had a nephew who converted to Judaism. In fact, one of the sources in the Talmud say that before he converted to Judaism, he wasn't sure if it was a good move. So he used some witchcraft or some form of I don't know, way of bringing up the dead. And he brings up his uncle Titus, and he says to Titus, "Tell me something. Who's doing well in the world to come? Like who's up there in the world to come?" And Titus says, "Oh, it's the Jews." So Onkelos says, "Oh, okay. So does that mean I should become Jewish?" And Titus says, "No, you should continue my work and continue to massacre them," which is a fascinating concept because one of the biggest differences between Judaism and Christianity is our view of the afterlife and hell. So, for those of you who have a Christian background, it's very much a fire and brimstone looking hell. And although there are some references to fire in hell in Jewish sources, they are not literal. We understand hell as, in some ways, perhaps much worse. what I'm going to say may not sound as bad, but if you give it some real thought, perhaps perhaps you would see why it's actually quite a bit worse. In the world to come, we will all, by the way, this is not a Jewish only thing. If somebody who isn't Jewish has kept the seven commandments and what comes under them, it's not exactly seven, but the seven umbrella headings, they too will receive a very, very wonderful world to come. But what seems to be is that a person's appreciation of what's going on in this future world is very much based on their sensitivity to what's going on. So if a person has spent their whole life engaged in completely physical things, they'll go to the next world and there'll be so much spiritual pleasure there. But because they've got no concept of what it means to connect to a spiritual world, to a world of goodness and meaning and purpose, they will not be able to appreciate anything. They'll see other people enjoying themselves, but for them, it will just be painful because they can see all of this goodness, but they can't connect to it. And all they want is what they're missing. As I said, it doesn't sound as bad as fire, but if you imagine eternity stuck while everybody around you is enjoying themselves and you just don't understand what there is to enjoy and you're just missing your steaks and your hotels and your whatever other physical world you did, and you're stuck like that for all eternity, that is a deeply painful thing, much worse than fire in a way. So the commentaries explain that Titus is saying to him that I acknowledge that I'm suffering here in this world, in this future world, and the Jews are, they're seen as very, very good here. But if you were to ask him, what is it that I should be doing? He's got no concept apart from what he spent his life here doing. This is why the sages all recommend that if you want to appreciate the life after we move on from this world, you better start becoming a connoisseur of spirituality. You need to, that doesn't mean being Jewish. It means being a connoisseur of spirituality. It means devoting your life to goodness and godliness. Because otherwise, when it comes to the next world, you're going to have no idea what's flying. So either way, Onkelos, that was a side point because I find that story fascinating and gives a real insight as to what we're supposed to be doing here in this world while we're here. Probably the best way, by the way, I could. Are any of you wine connoisseurs? Any of you like wine, whiskey connoisseurs? Whatever it happens to be, we know that it can take years to develop a palate for a certain type of drink or a certain type of food, and then there are these people who they can tell the difference between which year it was made, and they'll swirl it around in the cup, and there's a nose and all of these different things that they talk about, right? And it's got like hints of certain blossoms and whatever it happens to be. Yeah, if you give me a wine, I'll drink it tastes the same as any other wine. I've got absolutely no idea. So I've missed all of the beauty and the nuance of that because my tongue is and my palate is not trained to be able to see, to feel, experience the beauty of that particular wine. So that's probably the best parable I can give to the concept that I just said, which is that if you want to be able to experience the great goodness that is just waiting for all of us in the next world, you need to become a connoisseur of goodness and godliness. And every day we should be thinking, whether Jewish or not Jewish, we should be thinking very, very carefully. Today, what godliness can I bring into the world? What goodness can I? Those two things are the same, goodness and godliness. I just say them in just to make it clear. What aspect of goodness can I bring into this world? In what way can I connect to something that is beyond the physical boundaries of this world? Because otherwise, I'm going to have no idea what is flying when I pass on. Anyway, Onkelos, this commentary or translation, he translated the Torah, the five books of Moses. He translated it into Aramaic, which was the language of the masses at the time of the destruction of the Second Temple. And but if you look at his translation, it's actually not a translation. As he goes through translating these words, he inserts every so often an explanation. And when it comes to these words of God created human, he says, translates it as we're going along in Aramaic. He says, God took earth from the dust from the ground and he formed a being and he blew into this, he breathed into this being a living soul. And then human became a speaking spirit. That is the translation that he gives. A speaking spirit. And what he's trying to say to us is something that I think comes down to the very, very basis of everything that we're talking about. And that is that humans are unique in the fact that we can speak. Now, whenever I say this, there's always somebody who says, yeah, but what about dolphins? And what about this one? And what about that one? Yeah, I know that the other animals communicate with each other. I'm not saying that they don't have some basic communication skills. But we are the only beings in this world that can use words to deeply explain what's going on, to build other people with our words and connect to other people in a real meaningful way, and also to use our words to destroy other people. Our level of language and our level of ability to speak with all the different types of sounds that we can make and the combination of building it into words is actually truly miraculous. Truly miraculous. That ability to speak happened when our physical shell had our soul, our spiritual soul, inserted into it. At that very, very moment, when we became what would you call us? A combined being. We have an aspect of angel in us and an aspect of animal in us. Every one of us. Every human is half angel and half animal. What an interesting combination. So we are a battle between our physical urges that comes from our animal self, the shell, with all of its desires and all the things it wants right now. I need this right now. Yeah, you know that feeling that, now. On one hand. And then on the other hand, something angelic, something that's looking for longer term meaning, goodness, putting aside my immediate comforts or my immediate pleasures for something much, much greater and long term. I mean, we see this in so many areas of our life that the Torah guides us. One of the 7 commandments that was given to the descendants of Noah, of Noach, is the importance of not having intimacy in a prohibited way. Now, people could say, but 1 second, what about my needs here, my physical needs? But what the Torah is trying to tell us is something really straightforward in a way, and that is that there is something a much, much, much greater pleasure than physical pleasure that lasts for a moment and then is gone. If you think very, very carefully about, I don't know how blatant I should be, but I'm sure you all understand what I'm talking about without being blatant. If you think carefully about intimacy, it's a pleasure that lasts for a very short time and then is gone. However, when it is built on something which is more spiritual, that is deep and meaningful in a relationship, where there is trust and where there is commitment, in such a situation, that momentary physical pleasure becomes something much, much, much long lasting. But in order to have that, we need to be willing to say, okay, I'm going to put aside immediate physical gratification for something much more long term and much more meaningful. This is how we've been created. We've been created in this very, very unusual way. And at the moment when the physical and the spiritual got combined and linked together, and we are the only being in this world that has both of those sides, at that moment we started to speak. So what it looks like is that speech is actually something that's the sign of connection, the sign of linking. I mean, if you think about it, we use our mouth to connect, right? That's what we do. We use our mouth to build and connect to other people, to communicate with other people. That's what our mouth is for. And in prayer and in Psalms, we use our mouth to connect to our Creator. So it makes sense that the very, very organ or the very ability to speak happens at a point when two opposites start connecting. Our speech is the thing that represents connection of two different things in this world. And the sages use our speech to hurt somebody or harm somebody or put somebody down. It's actually way more damaging, often way more damaging than something physical passing in the moment. As I said to you, my very, very first class to you, that phrase, that song that many of us had when we were growing up, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt. Yes, we all had something similar to that. Yeah. And we know it's not true. What it should be is words will put me in therapy forever. You know, sticks and stones, they are a passing physical thing, but words are long-term suffering. Why is that? It's because our speech is the thing that represents connection. And we all need connection. We all strive for connection. We've been built in a way to connect to others. And when that very thing that's used to connect is used to destroy, it's a horrendous thing. And it actually causes much, much, much more harm. So that was just a very brief introduction for what I wanted to talk about today. Not so brief, it's already 7:58. People often ask me, can I say Lashon Hara? Remember, that's the Hebrew term for negative speech, speaking badly about somebody. Can I say Lashon Hara about myself? Can I walk around speaking badly about myself? And there is a famous story that everybody talks about when we ask this question. And it's a story about Rabbi Yisrael Meir Kagan, this great rabbi known as the Chafetz Chaim. He was the one, if you remember, who wrote the book on the laws of speech. There's a famous story. He was already an older man. And you've got to remember that this was happening sort of in the late 19th century, so the late 1800s, and there was no internet, and it was unusual to have photographs of rabbis, and people did not know what rabbis looked like. Occasionally, perhaps there was one in the public eye, but in general, they sat in their home or in their shuls, in their synagogues, studying, and people didn't really know unless they'd actually met them. People did not know what the rabbi looked like. Anyway, there happened to be a rabbis' conference, and this Rabbi Kagan, who was one of the leading rabbis of his generation, was traveling from his hometown Radin to this place where the rabbinic conference was going to be. And he was traveling by himself. But in the carriage with him, there was a young Jewish man. And to pass the time, Rabbi Kagan thought he would engage conversation with this young man. So he said to the young man, where are you headed? And the young man said, I've heard that the great Chafetz Chaim, the great Rabbi Kagan, is traveling to this particular town for a rabbis conference, and I want to get an opportunity to be able to meet him. So Rabbi Kagan said, he's not that great. Now the young man starts getting very, very worked up. What do you mean he's not that great? He's the leading rabbi of the generation. In fact, he's the rabbi of all the other rabbis. All the other rabbis turn to him as their rabbi. How can you come along and say he's not that great? And he's written this book and that book, and he wrote at the age of 30, he'd written this book about speech, and he never stopped writing, and he's been teaching all of his life, and he's a very, very old man now. How can you speak like that about him? So the Chafetz Chaim, Rabbi Kagan, says to the young man, listen, I know him personally, and I can tell you it's an exaggeration. He's not as good as that. When the young man heard this, he stood up, strode over to Rabbi Kagan, and smacked him round the face. Now, you can imagine that at this particular point, the train journey continues in silence. I'm not sure there's going to be that much conversation anymore. And eventually they arrive at their destination. And Rabbi Kagan, the Chafetz Chaim, steps out of the train. And on the platform, all the Jews of this town have gone to the platform to greet the great rabbi. And as he gets off the train, some of them recognize him. Some of them have met him before. And they start singing. And there's a special song that we sing when a great rabbi walks into the room. They start singing. And the young man, who's also stepped out on the platform at this particular town, suddenly realizes, oh no, I smacked the Chafetz Chaim around the face. Can you imagine? Can you imagine what that must have felt like? Wow. So he turns to Rabbi Kagan, the Chafetz Chaim, and he says to him, Rabbi, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize it was you. I was only standing up for your honor. I did. So the Chafetz Chaim turned to him and he said, young man, please don't worry. You taught me something very, very important. You taught me that you're not allowed to speak badly about yourself. Okay. Now that's the story. This is the story that everybody quotes. Anybody who wants to speak about this particular topic of speaking badly about yourself quotes this story. But the truth is that there are many sources that seem to show the opposite, that there is no Torah prohibition about speaking badly about yourself. And therefore, the story, I'm assuming that the story did happen. It's quoted by so many people. What the story means is something very simple. The Chafetz Chaim was just trying to settle the person's mind. And possibly what he meant was, you taught me that if I'm going to put myself down or minimize my greatness, I better make sure that you know that I am me. Right? That's what he means. But the truth is, there is no Torah prohibition to speak badly about yourself. And if you really, really want to, there's nothing stopping you. However, even though there is no prohibition, it is an extremely, extremely unhealthy thing to do. When people walk around putting themselves down, saying not nice things about themselves, calling themselves failures, stupid, ugly, fat, whatever it is that people judge themselves with, whatever words that people use to put themselves down. What tends to happen is that their words become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So there may not be a prohibition, but it is highly, highly, highly unrecommended. We should not be walking around speaking badly about ourselves or thinking badly about ourselves. We should not be walking around with this sort of big amount of self-deprecation that a lot of people do, because we just become that. And the concept of failure, the general concept that when we call ourselves a failure, that's all we become. That's all we become. And we weren't made to fail. We weren't created. We were created for a purpose. So I want to share with you something very, very, very important that I received from my teacher, my rabbi. There is something in Hebrew called cheshbon hanefesh. Literally, cheshbon hanefesh means a self-accounting. Cheshbon is mathematics, or accountancy. Okay, and nefesh is the self, an accounting of the self. The great rabbis through the generations did regular self-accounting. And the reason they did regular self-accounting is because so many people go through life without ever actually thinking about themselves, why they're here, and how they can improve, that they go through life, perhaps working through the day, exhausted, come home, sit in front of the TV, watch Netflix until they go to bed. And they wake up the next day and they're never actually thinking, why am I living? Why am I doing all of this? Why am I working so hard? Is it so I can go on holiday? Is that really why I'm here? I'm working hard so I can earn money so I can go on holiday for 2 weeks a year. And I'm going through all of that work, hard work. Just, is that why I'm here? Nobody ever, most people don't even spend even a moment of their life thinking about that. And then they hit their midlife crisis. They suddenly realize, oh my gosh, I'm about to die. And what have I actually achieved? And instead of taking it seriously, they are desperately in search for trying to get youth back. So they buy a new sports car, they exchange their spouse for a younger model, and they dye their hair blonde or whatever it happens to be. Yeah? Each to their own. But the greats, the really great people, would always do a daily cheshbon hanefesh, a daily self-accounting, where they would look through their day. How was my day? Did my day take me closer to my goal and purpose? Or were there things in my day that pulled me away from my goal and purpose in this life? Now, one of the things you may have heard me say just there, the underlying necessity in order to be able to do cheshbon hanefesh, the underlying message is that we each need to know what our goal and purpose is. How could you possibly sit down each day and think, was today a day that took me closer to my purpose in this world? Or was it a day that took me further away? How could you think that if you don't know what your purpose here in this world is? So I'd like to share with you what may be simple and it may actually be obvious to you. I don't know. I don't know what you've heard before. I don't know what you've read. But I want to share with you what it looks like working out what your purpose in life is. And it starts like this. Have you ever spent time wondering when you can't go to sleep at night and you're bothered by things, wondering why you're not clones of me? or Angelique. Why are we not clones of each other? I don't mean just the way we look. I'm talking about many, many, many different things. Why are we not made clones of each other? And the answer is really simple. The creator, who doesn't make mistakes, has created each one of us uniquely different because each one of us has a different purpose. So how do you work out what something's purpose is? Well, let's give an example. That vacuum cleaner that moves by itself, the Roomba. Is it called a Roomba in where you're from as well? Roomba or iRobot, different names for these things, okay? How do I know why it was created? Do you know what I do? I turn it on and then I watch it. And I watch it goes up and down, sucking up earth like this. Yes. Hitting the wall, moving back, and while the owner can sit on the couch. So how did I work out without reading? Of course, I can read, but let's say I can't read. It didn't come with instructions. I don't know what this is made for, right? How do I work out why it was created? I turn it on and I watch. And based on its skills, traits, and abilities, it then shows me why it was created. Make sense? So when I watch it and I see it sucking up the dust and moving back, I learn that actually it wasn't created to put a cat on it that moves up and down. I think we talked about this before in a previous class, right? I know this now because that is something that some people use a Roomba for on their YouTube video, but that's not why it was created. That is what we need to do. We need to think carefully about what our traits and skills and abilities are. And we're supposed to write a long list of those sorts of things. You make a long list of your traits, your skills, and your abilities. Traits, when I use those three different words, I'll just explain to you what they mean. Traits are your character traits. Skills are natural things that you're born with, right? Some people have natural musical ability or natural art ability, or they have a mathematical brain, or whatever it happens to be. Yeah. And abilities is things that you have developed from those skills, right? You've taken it and you've worked hard and you've now got, a wider ability. We need to write down very, very clearly a long list of who we are. Based on that, we should be able to work out what our purpose is, because none of us are created equal. Oh, sorry, we're all created equal. None of us are created the same. We're equal, but different. We all have very, very different skills and abilities. And when you take those things and you put them together, you come up with, this is a person who. So I have, this is not, I don't mean this in an arrogant way, but I've been given the ability to give over ideas and concepts, to teach, to share ideas. I'm also a caring person. And I was forced, as you know, for those of you who had the first class, I was forced into working on this particular area of my life. And therefore, it's become something that I do, and that's my purpose. And for many of you, if you remember, it's very much about healing damage that I've done in the past. Each one of us should look and see, what can I do? What am I good at? It makes sense that the Creator has given me everything I need to fulfill my purpose. But that can't just be it. Because if that's it, and I'm a pre-programmed robot with everything I need just to fulfill my purpose, then what have I achieved? I haven't achieved anything. When I actually go and do the thing that I've been, when the Roomba finishes cleaning the room, yes, nobody goes, wow, well done, amazing, what a brilliant, you did such a brilliant job. They don't do that. Why? Because we all understand it was pre-programmed. The robot didn't do anything. Whoever programmed the robot did that thing. And therefore, the Creator, in his kindness, gives us things that hold us back. They could be desires, they could be struggles, they could be trauma, they could be lots of different things in our life. Family have caused us trouble, difficulties, physical difficulties, mental difficulties. The Creator, in his kindness, even though it perhaps may not look that way, but in his kindness gives us difficulties that we need to overcome. Because otherwise we would just be a robot, and then why would we deserve any applause for achieving? So instead, what he does is he gives us something that gets in the way so that we have to overcome that thing. In the story that we read in synagogue yesterday, that thing was the embodiment of a snake. And Adam and Eve are there, and the snake is trying to entice them to not. It was a very, very, very powerful thing. You probably read that story. It's like, all of those fables when you think, oh, please don't do it. Don't do it. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like with the goose and the gold. Like, don't kill the goose. Just let the golden egg come out each day. Yeah. Some of those stories, you think Adam and Eve, no, don't listen. You got to understand it was a very, very, very powerful voice. It was a very powerful voice because it needed to be powerful. Because if it wasn't powerful, then what would they have achieved by overcoming it? They didn't overcome it, but they had the opportunity to achieve real greatness by overcoming it. So when we do a cheshbon hanefesh, this self-accounting, it has to come from a very, very, very strong place of, I understand that I am a ball of potential divine greatness. Because what some people do is they walk around, as I said, with this very self-critical words. They're always putting themselves down. Oh, I'm a failure. I can't achieve. I'll never do it. What's the point? And then, of course, they don't bother. They have something called despair, and they never actually achieve. Instead, we're supposed to come, first of all, from a point where I understand that I have greatness. I understand that I've been created for greatness. I understand I have everything in my power to achieve greatness. But I also know that I've been given a gift. It's a wonderful gift, and it's a very painful gift sometimes. Very painful gift. But it's a wonderful gift because when I overcome it, I've actually achieved myself. So as an example, I said to you that I can teach. But I'll also tell you, if you want, I'll share with you one of my biggest challenges. One of my biggest challenges is I don't believe I can teach. That's weird. I know it's weird. Over here, I know it's weird. But deep down inside myself, I don't think I can. And I spent 40 years of my life running away from being a teacher. My dad's a rabbi. My grandfather was a rabbi. My great-grandfather was a rabbi. And I said, over my dead body, I'm not going to become a rabbi. Instead, I'm going to be an optometrist. And I went to become an optometrist. And I went to university and I studied for 3 years. And then I worked full time, and I'm a low vision optometrist. That means I specialize in a very specific area of optometry. But the Creator didn't give up on me, and he basically forced me back into this. Fascinating, no? I was given skills and abilities, and I was also given blocks to them. Blocks where even now I don't believe that I can teach well. And even now, after I've written a book, which has got, very, very good feedback, I still don't think I can write well. It's madness. And more than this has happened before when I've actually said this in a class. People will sometimes say, but Rabbi, you're such a great teacher and you write so well, and I love reading your book. And that doesn't help. Because when you hear it from out, when you suffer from low self-esteem and you hear it from outside of you, it makes no difference whatsoever. Because I know that anybody who says it to me is just being nice, right? They're just being nice. Deep down, I've got to feel it inside. I have to feel that inside. So that's something that I'm working to overcome. And it's a lifelong project, a lifelong project. But what's important here is that I now have self-awareness. That is crucial here. I have self-awareness and I sit down and I think, did this take me closer? Did this pull me away? What's pulling me away? What can I do to try and build myself inside so that I don't have this low self-esteem pulling me away? Each one of us needs to do that. We have to spend time thinking about ourselves. That's extremely, extremely difficult in today's world because we have so many distractions. Perhaps it was easier to think about ourselves in the past. But nowadays we've all got smartphones, iPhones, we've got TV, we've got something distracting us. We should set aside some time every single day where we switch off all gadgets, go somewhere quiet, nowhere near anybody else, and just sit with a pen and paper and examine ourselves. And if me even saying that to you is making you feel uncomfortable, that's okay. That's the snake in you. The snake in you is saying it. The snake in you is saying, no, no, no. Oh, I couldn't do that. Oh, no, no, I couldn't do that. But understand it's the snake speaking. So I've been speaking now for 22 minutes. I've got a few more things that I can say, but I would prefer if I can just give a few minutes, if anybody has a question about what I've said. I acknowledge that what I've said today is actually quite a heavy subject. I'm not running away from that. We've had lighter subjects in the past. But as we've just read, the creation of human, and we've been talking about this battle between the two sides of ourselves, the desire to create goodness and connect to our creator, and the side of ourselves that pulls us away from that and instead just says, no long-term stuff. Just get into that thing right now, that animalistic side of us, and realizing that both of those things are gifts from God. We do not believe, unlike the Christian concept, we do not believe that the desire to do wrong is a separate power under the devil. We do not believe in that. There is something called Satan in Jewish concepts, but that Satan is not a power outside of God. He is an angel of God. He does God's bidding. It's a big, big, big difference between us and Christianity. He does God's bidding, and his job is to give us free choice. In fact, and I'll say this very, very clearly, whenever you feel that drive inside of you to do something wrong, you should say, oh, hello, it's you again, my best friend. You're my best friend because without you, I would just be a robot. And here you are, doing your job, and I love you for that. I love you so much because you're an angel of my creator who's given me the opportunity to achieve greatness, and I will only ever achieve greatness if you're trying to stop me. So thanks, and now I'm not going to listen to you. That's really what should happen. The problem is that we don't have the opportunity to think. It happens too quickly. So one of the best things, and I'll stop because I do want to give people opportunity to ask something. One of the best things that the great ethical masters in the Jewish world, what are called the Musa rabbis, the ethical rabbis, the ones who dealt with ethical improvement, One of the things that they talk about always is pause. Or I don't know if you pronounce that in different countries in different ways. Pause. Pause. You suddenly feel anger. Just 1 second. Just pause for a second. Give a moment for that thought inside your brain to actually engage. Ah, no, this is real. It's just the messenger from the creator who's coming along to try and make it harder for me so that then I can overcome. And by that time, you'll have calmed down. Pause. When one of my kids is winding me up, one of the things which happens, by the way, it's normal family, and I can feel it starting to. I say in my mind, calm. Before anything, I say calm. Does it always work? No, it doesn't always work because I'm a work in progress. I'm far from perfect. But that's what I say when I'm calm. There was a great rabbi who used to have an anger coat. Whenever he felt that he was getting angry, he would go to his cupboard, open up the cupboard, put on his special anger jacket, his anger coat, because he wasn't allowed to be angry unless he was wearing it. That's the rule that he made for himself. I'm not allowed to be angry unless I've got my special anger coat on. But of course, by the time he'd gone to the cupboard and he put on his jacket, he'd had a moment to think. And then he remembered, this isn't real. It's just the messenger from the creator so that I can now achieve greatness. The rabbis say a person only ever does something wrong when an aspect of insanity enters his brain. That's it. In that moment, we've gone insane. So stop, pause, calm, think. Always easier to say it than do it. But I've spoken enough today. What did people want to say? Oh, there's quite a few comments here. Let's have a look. Oh, no, it's something else. What's here? Viktor Frankl said that the real power lays between the stimulus and the 100%. I'm a massive fan of Viktor Frankl. Beautifully said. Thank you very much for that.